If you haven't done so yet, now might be the right time, the perfect time to invest in some I bonds. I'll explain why and what you need to be aware of. That and more coming up. My name is Mike Bernard. I'm the host of the Wise Money Show. I'm also one of the certified financial planners right here at Korhorn Financial Group. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and smash that thumbs up button. I bonds have gotten so much attention. I stands for inflation. Bond means these are a treasury bond. It's a savings bond. Okay, so they're very safe. That's the treasury bond part. And they're supposed to keep up with inflation. And with that combination in a high inflationary time, that's pretty important, right? To have the security and soundness that your investment's not going to go down in value, and that even bonds, while you hold a bond or a brokerage CD, if you've ever heard that term, between the time you invest and the time it matures, it can fluctuate in value. And even if you have no intention of selling it, even just seeing the value drop in your statement can be concerning. And so savings bonds, these I bonds, they're not going to fluctuate in value. So that's great. And then second, they're going to have an interest rate that keeps up with inflation. So very, very appealing. And we've talked about them several times on the channel, and we've done a few different videos on them. And if you haven't, I'm not recommending that you go out and invest in an I bonds, but if you've been considering it and you've talked to your CFP and say, yeah, this makes sense for us, don't delay. Now might be the exact right time to do so. Here's why. How they work, the I bonds, okay? How they work is you get an interest rate, you lock in your interest rate for 6 months. And then it changes 6 months later for the next 6 months. And then it will change again, and then it will change again. So each time you're locking in an interest rate for 6 months. Well, right now, before November 1st of 2022, I don't know when you're watching this, recording it middle, kind of end of October of 2022, as long as you invest, any dollars you invest before November 1st, you're going to get the current rate right now and lock it in for 6 months, which right now it is 9.62%. That's fantastic. We don't know yet what the upcoming interest rate will be from November 1, to April 1st, but it's likely to still be high, although lower than the 9.62. I'll share an estimate here in just a second. But here's why many people, including us, are saying if it's appropriate for you to be investing or putting some dollars in I bonds, now might be the time to do it if you haven't done so yet. Now might be the time, because you can lock in today's rate, the 9.62% for 6 months, and then for your next 6 months still have a pretty good or higher interest rate than what you'd get on a savings account or money market, something like that. We're going to get the upcoming rate. We're going to get it here probably by November 1st, if not a couple days before. Lots of people are projecting it's going to be around 6.5%, maybe even 7%. So that's a big wake-up call. It's going to be a lot lower than what people have been expecting. But you'd be able to, if you invested before November 1st, you'd get this higher 9.62% for the 6 months, and then you'd transition into that lower rate for the next 6 months. Here's why that's important. It's very possible inflation and these I bond rates are starting to come down. And that's why some experts are starting to predict that the next I bond rate is going to be 6.5 something percent. And it's possible these rates are on their way down. If that's the case, these I bonds will eventually start paying an interest rate that they were paying in the past, which meant no one paid attention to them. It was a decent interest rate, but it wasn't such a phenomenal rate that you're going to deal with the complexity and have the side account with this separate money in there. Eventually, these interest rates on these I bonds are going to get back to that sort of boring interest rate. They're not there right now. They're keeping up with inflation and paying a lot higher than normal interest rates. But at some point, they're going to go back to that level. And at that point, you might just be thinking, well, then I'll cash my money out of the I bonds and I'll go put it back where I wanted it before in my savings account. Well, you've got to hold an I bond for 12 months. You have to. Before that's the minimum holding period. You've got to hold it for 12 months. So if you can act and invest before November 1st, you can lock in your first 6 months at 9.62%. Your next 6 months will be at this other interest rate, maybe 6.5%, maybe 7%. And then if the interest rate then shifts to something that is really undesirable, you could say, well, I've met my 12 months, I'll cash my I-bonds out. If you do so, we've talked about all the complications, the rules, the limitations with I-bonds in the past, but just to cover that real quick, after holding them for 12 months, you're then able to cash it out, okay? If you cash the I-bond out within 5 years, you've got to pay back 3 months worth of interest. Okay, if you hold the I-bond past 5 years, you can cash it out at any time and not have to repay 3 months of interest. And you could even hold it as long as you want to, up to 30 years, which is the original term. But I've looked at this, and as appealing as it sounded and looked over the past 6 to 12 months, one of the risks is that eventually inflation will level off, and these I-bonds will go back to paying an interest rate that you'd say, okay, that's okay, but it's nothing too exciting, nothing too, something that you're going to want to add a bunch of complexity to. And so at that point, I'd be wary about loading up so much on I-bonds right now, and then all of a sudden, well, now I'm holding these things, and now the interest rate has gone down because inflation has gotten under control. So if you're able to invest right now, if you haven't done so yet, if you're able to invest right now and you can confirm or put yourself in the best position that at least over the next 12 months your interest rate is going to be really strong, my goodness, you're going to be in a great position. I would expect inflation to stay stubborn for at least 12 months, if not 18 to 24. But at some point, on the other side of that, these interest rates on these I-bonds are going to go back to 1 or nothing, and it's very possible we'll get back to the point where your savings account or your money market's going to be paying a higher interest rate than these I-bonds, and in that case, you're going to be tempted to cash the money out of the I-bonds and all that sort of stuff. So that's where I would be careful, and now you can lock in potentially full 12 months of solid interest. One other point, I'm sure you're aware, but one of the other limitations with I-bonds is you can only put 10 grand per calendar year into these things. Now that's per person. So if you're married, you can each put 10 grand in. If you've got kids, you can do that for them as well. If you have a trust account, you own a business, you can add 10 grand there as well. But that's calendar year. So the way I understand that is if you wanted to, if you haven't done so yet and you wanted to put 10 grand in right now before that November 1st timeframe, you could do that. You could then do another 10 grand in January because that would be the next calendar year. I don't believe it's every 12 months. I think it's calendar year is what the site says. So could add it in January, but there again, those January dollars, if you invest then, their first 6 months would be at the new rate, which again, experts are saying around 6.5%, something like that. And then their next 6 months would be at whatever the rate is at that point. The big idea, work with your certified financial planner. This is, I wouldn't see this as everyone needs to hold I-bonds. I wouldn't see this as a full bond replacement because of the limitations that you've got here. I wouldn't see this as where you should put your emergency fund because the dollars are not liquid. They've got this holding requirement. It's kind of complicated, takes a little bit of time to get access to. So it may make sense for a lot of you, but work with your certified financial planner. See if it does make sense, and if so, how much, and then if so, what your strategy should be. For those of you that have already done that and this makes sense, jump on it now before November 1st. Should be able to lock in a full 12 months of solid interest. Work with your CFP. If you don't have a CFP on your team that can help you with that, you can contact one on my team. Find us online, Korhorn.com. That's Korhorn with K, wisemoneyshow.com. You can find us there as well. Otherwise, you can give us a call, 574-247-5898. All right, there you have it. Go out and take your next wise step in your financial life.